The Phantom Route Driver. I've been driving the midnight route for 3 years now. Route 47. Same stops, same empty streets, same fluorescent hum of the bus depot at 2 a.m. when I clock out. It pays well enough for night work, and I like the quiet. Most nights, anyway. The route runs through the industrial district, past the old textile mills, then loops back through downtown before heading to the terminal. 43 stops total. I know every pothole, every traffic light timing, every shadow that moves wrong in my peripheral vision. Or, I thought I did. It started last Tuesday. Nothing dramatic, just different. I was pulling away from the depot around 11:45 p.m., radio crackling with dispatch chatter, when I noticed the fuel gauge. Full tank, like always. Maintenance fills her up before my shift, but the needle sat at 3/4. I tapped the glass, still 3/4. Weird, I muttered, adjusting my coffee cup in the holder. House blend from the gas station, still warm. The first passenger got on at Maple and 3rd. Older woman, maybe 60, wearing a navy coat that looked expensive but worn. She paid exact change, coins dropping into the fare box with that familiar metal ping. Normal enough. Except when I glanced in the rearview mirror after she sat down, her reflection seemed delayed, like it took an extra second to catch up. I shook my head. 12-hour shifts do things to your brain. 2 more passengers at different stops. A young guy in scrubs, hospital worker probably, and a teenager with earbuds who kept glancing out the back window like someone was following us. Standard midnight crowd, the kind of people who need to be somewhere at hours when the rest of the world sleeps. But around stop 17, I started noticing the streets. They looked right. Same buildings, same intersections. But the spacing felt off, like someone had stretched everything just slightly. The distance between streetlights seemed longer, the gaps between buildings wider. And the buildings themselves, they were the right shape, the right color, but the details were wrong. A hardware store that should have had a blue awning had a green one. A church steeple that I passed every night was missing its weather vane. I pulled over and checked my route map. Everything matched. Maple Street to Industrial Boulevard to downtown, then back to the terminal. Same as always. "You all right up there?" The woman in the navy coat had moved closer, standing in the aisle despite the "no standing while vehicle is in motion" sign. "Just checking something," I said. "Please take a seat." She smiled, but her teeth looked too white in the overhead lights. "Of course, it's just, we wouldn't want to be late." "Late for what?" I wanted to ask. But she was already walking back to her seat, and something about the way she moved, too smooth, like she was gliding, made me keep my mouth shut. The fuel gauge now read half empty. At stop 23, someone else got on. Middle-aged man in a suit, briefcase in hand. He nodded politely, paid his fare, and took a seat near the front. As he sat down, he turned to look at me. "Beautiful night for a drive, isn't it?" I glanced out at the street. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. Had been all day. "Sure," I said. "First time taking the midnight route?" That made me look at him properly. "I've been driving this route for 3 years." "Ah," he smiled. "My mistake." But he said it like he knew something I didn't. Stop 28 brought another passenger, then another. By stop 30, the bus was nearly full, which never happened on the midnight route. Never. Most nights, I'd have maybe 5 people total for the entire circuit, and they were all watching me. Not obviously, just quick glances in the rearview mirror, heads turning when I shifted gears or made a turn, like they were studying me, memorizing something. The fuel gauge read empty, but the engine kept running smooth as silk. "Excuse me," I called back to them. "Anyone know what time it is?" A chorus of voices answered at once, all different times: 12:47, 1:15, 2:23, 11:38, like their watches were broken or running in different zones entirely. I looked at the clock on my dashboard. 3:33 a.m., but that was impossible. My shift had started at 11:45, and we'd only made 30 stops. The route never took more than 2 hours. "We're almost there," said the woman in the navy coat. Almost where? The terminal, of course. But when I looked out the windshield, I didn't recognize the street we were on. The buildings were taller here, older, with architectural details I'd never seen before. Victorian ironwork, Gothic stone facades, windows that reflected nothing, not even the bus's headlights. And there were people walking on the sidewalks at 3:33 a.m., dozens of them, all dressed in clothes from different eras. A woman in a 1920s flapper dress, a man in medieval robes, children in Victorian sailor suits. They all stopped walking and turned to watch as we passed. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I tried to radio dispatch, but all I got was static. White noise that sounded almost like whispers if you listened too close. "Driver." The man in the suit was standing now, briefcase at his side. "You'll want to take the next left. That's not on the route. Tonight it is." The bus seemed to turn on its own. My hands followed the wheel, but I wasn't controlling it anymore. We rolled down a narrow street, lined with shops I'd never seen before. Antique stores with mannequins in the windows wearing faces that looked too real. A bookshop called Final Chapters. A pawn shop with a sign that read, "Memories bought and sold." The passengers behind me were murmuring now. Soft conversations I couldn't quite make out, but the tone was expectant, like they were waiting for something to begin. We stopped in front of a building that looked like a bus terminal, but wrong. The architecture was all mixed up. Art Deco columns supporting a Gothic roof, Victorian gingerbread trim around modern glass doors. Above the entrance, a digital sign flickered. "Terminus. Departures only." "End of the line," announced the woman in the navy coat, though I hadn't said anything. The passengers started filing off, but as each one passed me, they paused. The hospital worker pressed something into my palm. It felt like a coin, but when I looked down, it was a subway token from a system that hadn't existed for 30 years. "For the memories," he said quietly. The teenager with the earbuds stopped next. She pulled them out, and I could hear music playing, but it was coming from inside her head, not the earbuds. A song I'd heard my mother sing when I was 7. "Your first pet," she whispered. "I'll take good care of it." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. And suddenly, I couldn't remember. There had been something, a dog, a cat, something small and warm that used to sleep at the foot of my bed when I was a kid. But the details were gone, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. One by one, they each took something as they left. The man in the suit paused longest. "Your first kiss," he said, reaching out to touch my forehead with one finger. The memory dissolved instantly. I knew it had happened. I was 16, maybe 17, but I couldn't see her face anymore, couldn't remember her name, or where we were, or how it felt. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Payment," he said simply. Nothing's free, not even the way home. The woman in the navy coat was the last to leave. She stood in the doorway of the bus, one hand on the rail, looking back at me with those two white teeth. "The route's not over yet," she said. "You still have to get back." "Back to what?" "That depends on what you're willing to trade." She stepped off the bus, and the doors closed with a pneumatic hiss. I was alone, sitting in a vehicle that shouldn't have been running on an empty tank, in a place that shouldn't have existed, with gaps in my memory where pieces of my life used to be. I looked at my logbook on the dashboard. The pages were blank, all of them. 3 years of routes, passenger counts, maintenance notes, gone. Like I'd never driven this bus before. The radio crackled to life. "Bus 47, what's your status?" "Dispatch. Normal, familiar, real." I'm not sure where I am." "You're showing on GPS at the downtown terminal, right on schedule. Good run tonight, Marcus. Head on back to depot." Downtown terminal. I looked around. The Gothic buildings, the antique shops, the impossible architecture, all gone. I was parked in front of the regular bus terminal, fluorescent lights humming overhead, newspaper vending machines lined up against the brick wall. My fuel gauge read full. I drove back to the depot in silence. Everything looked normal. The same potholes, the same traffic lights, the same shadows in the right places. But I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see passengers who weren't there. At the depot, I parked in Bay 7 like always, filled out my route report like always. Fuel consumption, normal. Passenger count, 5. Incidents, none. But when I tried to write down the details, my pen hovered over the paper. 5 passengers. I could see their faces clearly. The woman in the navy coat, the man in the suit, the teenager, the hospital worker. But when I tried to remember getting on, where they'd paid to go, what they'd said, it was like grasping at fog. "Good night, Marcus." Jerry from the day shift was already prepping his bus in the next bay. "How was the route?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Quiet night." But as I walked to my car, something nagged at me. Had Jerry always called me Marcus? It sounded right, but also distant, like a name someone else used for me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, key in the ignition, trying to shake the feeling that I was forgetting something important. Not just something, everything. Like I was a photocopy of myself, a little blurred around the edges. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Hope your shift went well. Love you." I stared at the message. Sarah, my girlfriend, wife. The name was familiar, but her face in my mind was indistinct. I scrolled up through our conversation history. Normal couple texts, plans for dinner, reminders about bills, inside jokes I couldn't quite understand anymore. There was a photo she'd sent 2 days ago, a selfie of her laughing at something off camera. She was beautiful, dark hair, green eyes, smile that looked like it could light up a room. But she felt like a stranger wearing the face of someone I should love. I drove home to an apartment that looked right, but felt wrong. My key worked in the lock. My name was on the mailbox. But walking through the rooms was like touring a museum of someone else's life. Photos on the refrigerator showed me with people I recognized but couldn't really remember. A birthday party where I was blowing out candles on a cake, surrounded by laughing faces that might as well have been extras in a movie. A vacation to somewhere with mountains and pine trees. My arm around a woman who must have been Sarah, both of us squinting into bright sunlight. I found my driver's license in my wallet. Marcus Chen, 28 years old. Same address, same photo. But the man in the picture looked like he knew secrets I'd forgotten. In the bedroom, Sarah was sleeping. I stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, waiting for recognition to click into place, like a key turning in a lock. But she remained a beautiful stranger in my bed, in my life, in a story I could no longer fully recall. I didn't sleep that night, just sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and trying to remember what I'd traded away. Not just memories, something deeper, some essential part of myself that had been currency in a transaction I barely understood. The next evening, I reported for my shift as usual. Route 47. The same route I'd driven for. How long? The employment record said 3 years, but it felt both longer and shorter than that. "Marcus," Jerry waved as I passed his bay. "Ready for another quiet run?" I nodded and climbed into bus 47. Same cracked vinyl seat, same coffee stain on the dashboard, same fuel gauge reading full. I checked my logbook, blank pages stretching endlessly forward. As I pulled out of the depot, I glanced at the passenger manifest clipboard. Empty, as expected, but written in pencil at the bottom, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were 5 words. "Some routes run both ways." I erased them quickly and started the engine. The radio crackled. "Bus 47, you're clear for departure." "Copy that," I said, my voice steady. "Route 47 outbound." But as I turned onto Maple Street, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the city, in a terminal that existed between the gaps of memory, passengers were waiting for the return trip. And next time, they might want more than memories. They might want the driver. I pressed the accelerator, and bus 47 rolled into the darkness, carrying me towards stops I might remember or might forget, depending on who got on along the way.